Okay, let's jump right into our deep dive today. We're looking at a really fascinating historical account from the Bible.
We are, specifically chapter 20 of 2 Kings.
Right. And this chapter, it really focuses on King Hezekiah during this incredibly dramatic point in his life.
It's quite something. It's almost like a mini drama packed into one chapter. You've got sickness, prophecy, prayer.
Miracles, a bizarre sign.
Exactly. And then this sort of international incident and a big prophecy that follows. It all happens very quickly here.
So our mission really is to unpack all that, look at the sequence of events, and maybe pull out some of the key insights from the source material.
Sounds good.
And it kicks off in a pretty intense place, doesn't it? Hezekiah is basically on his deathbed.
That's right. The text says he was sick and near death. And it's clearly serious because the prophet Isaiah shows up.
And Isaiah isn't exactly bringing flowers and get-well-soon cards, is he?
No, far from it. He comes with a direct message from God, and it's brutal.
What does he say?
Essentially, put your house in order because you are going to die. You will not recover. It sounds utterly final, like this is it.
Wow, talk about a heavy burden. Hearing that directly from a prophet, how does Hezekiah even react to news like that?
Well, his reaction is very private, very intense. It says he turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord.
So not a public display, just him and God.
Exactly. And his prayer, it's an appeal, really. He asks God to remember his faithfulness.
What are his words, roughly?
He says something like, "Remember, Lord, how I've walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what is good in your eyes."
So he's reminding God of his track record, in a way.
Yes, and then it adds this really human touch. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. So this is raw emotion, deep grief, not just, reciting some words.
That combination of appealing to his past and just this complete emotional outpouring, and then what happens next is just remarkable.
It really is. And fast. The text says Isaiah hadn't even left the middle court of the palace.
So he's still practically right there.
Right. He's barely turned around, and the word of the Lord comes to him again.
Okay, hold on. So God sends message A, you're dying. Hezekiah prays, cries. And before the messenger is even out of sight, God sends message B, never mind.
That's pretty much how it reads. The second message is a total reversal. God tells Isaiah, "Go back and tell Hezekiah, I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you."
It explicitly connects the reversal to the prayer and the tears. That raises big questions, doesn't it? About kind of how fixed divine plans are, maybe.
It certainly does within this narrative. It suggests that prayer, genuine heartfelt prayer, can actually influence the outcome. It presents a dynamic where God responds to human appeals. It's a strong statement about prayer mattering.
Incredible. And it's not just, okay, you won't die. There's more to the promise.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Much more. God promises healing, specifically saying, on the third day from now, you will go up to the temple of the Lord.
So a timeline for recovery.
And crucially, I will add 15 years to your life, a specific number, 15 more years.
15 years, that's a significant extension. And wasn't there something about the kingdom's safety, too?
Yes, that's a huge part of it. The promise continues. And I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city.
Assyria, they were the big threat at the time, weren't they? The superpower.
Absolutely. Hezekiah had just faced a massive siege from them, Sennacherib's army, in the previous chapter, and saw a miracle then too. So this is God reinforcing that protection. Deliverance from Assyria is tied into this promise of extended life.
So one heartfelt prayer brings personal healing, more years of life, and national security. That's quite a result.
It is. And then there's this interesting practical detail about the healing itself.
What's that?
Well, even after this divine promise, Isaiah gives an instruction. He says, prepare a poultice of figs.
Figs, like the fruit.
Yeah. They make a paste or a compress out of figs and put it on the boil that was making him sick. And the text says, and he recovered.
So God promises healing, but they still use medicine.
Exactly. It's this blend. The miracle doesn't seem to cancel out using the available remedies of the time. Figs were actually used for things like boils back then. It suggests divine action can work alongside natural means.
That kind of grounds the story a bit, doesn't it? It's not all just floating on miracles.
Right. But then Hezekiah asks for something purely miraculous. He wants a sign.
He asks for proof, even after hearing the promise directly from Isaiah.
He does. He asks basically, how will I know for sure that God will heal me and I'll be back in the temple in 3 days? He wants something tangible.
And the sign offered is, well, it's astronomical almost. It involves a shadow.
Yes, on the stairway of Ahaz, which scholars think was probably some kind of sundial or stepped structure used for telling time, Isaiah gives him a choice.
A choice. What kind of choice?
Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps, or shall it go back 10 steps?
Forward seems, well, normal, right? Shadows move forward as the sun moves.
Precisely. Hezekiah points that out. He says moving forward 10 steps is easy, sort of the natural way. Rather, he says, have it go back 10 steps. He picks the impossible option.
The one that defies the laws of physics as they knew them.
Exactly. So Isaiah prays, and the text says, the Lord made the shadow go back the 10 steps it had gone down.
Wow. Not just a feeling or an internal sign, but something external, observable, tied to time itself. People would have seen that.
It's presented as a very public, undeniable confirmation. So he's got his life back, 15 extra years, the kingdom's safe, and this incredible sign seems like he's on top of the world, divinely speaking.
You'd think so. Recovered, secured, life extended, confirmed by a miracle. But then the chapter shifts gear, doesn't it? Right after this high point.
Does dramatically. Suddenly we hear about visitors. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness.
Visitors from Babylon. Now, Babylon isn't the big empire yet at this point, but they're definitely a rising power, right?
That's key context. They're not the dominant force Assyria is, but they're ambitious and definitely rivals of Assyria.
So they sent envoys just because they heard he was sick. Seems a bit more than just polite well-wishing.
Oh, almost certainly. Historians generally see this as a politically motivated visit, even though it's framed as concern for his health.
What would be the motive then?
Well, Babylon was looking for allies against Assyria. Hearing about Judah's king surviving a massive Assyrian siege, then miraculously recovering from illness, Hezekiah looks like a potentially strong, divinely favored partner. This was likely a diplomatic probe, let's check this guy out mission.
Okay, so these envoys arrive, maybe with a hidden agenda. How does Hezekiah handle it?
And this is where things take a turn. The text says, Hezekiah received the messengers and showed them all that was in his storehouses.
What does all mean here?
It means all. The silver, the gold, the spices, and the fine oil, his armory, and everything found amongst his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them.
He gave them the full tour, showed them the treasury, the weapons, everything. That seems incredibly unwise. Why do that?
The text doesn't state his motive explicitly. Maybe pride. You know, he just got his life back, saw this miracle, maybe he felt puffed up, maybe he wanted to impress these potential allies, show them Judah was strong and wealthy.
Or maybe just bad judgment, a moment of boasting.
Could be. Whatever the reason, the action itself, this complete transparency about his kingdom's resources and military capacity, is what triggers the next event.
Which involves Isaiah again, right? The prophet doesn't miss much.
No, he doesn't. Isaiah comes back and basically asks Hezekiah, who were those guys? What did they want? Where'd they come from?
And Hezekiah tells him.
Yeah, he says they came from a distant land, from Babylon.
And then Isaiah asks the crucial question.
Right. What did they see in your palace?
And Hezekiah owns up to it completely.
Completely. He says, they saw everything in my palace. There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them. He doesn't seem to hide it or realize the implication, maybe.
And based purely on that act, showing them everything Isaiah delivers another prophecy.
Yes. And this one is chilling. It's presented as the direct consequence of showing off the treasures.
What does Isaiah say this time?
He says, hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord.
So the very stuff he proudly displayed will end up in Babylon. The consequence is directly linked to the action. That's harsh.
It gets worse. It's not just about the stuff.
Oh.
Isaiah continues, and some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon.
His own children or grandchildren forced into service in the Babylonian court. That's devastating. It basically foretells the Babylonian exile, doesn't it? Which happened decades later.
Exactly. The story links Hezekiah's action during his extended lifespan directly to that future national catastrophe.
So if you track this chapter, near death, miraculous recovery, 15 more years, divine protection, an amazing sign, and then boom! One act of perhaps pride or folly leads to a prophecy of utter ruin for his descendants and kingdom. The turnaround is incredibly fast.
It is. It highlights this tension, doesn't it, between divine favor and human responsibility. The extra years were a gift, but what he did with those years had consequences. Showing off his wealth set something terrible in motion, according to this narrative.
And Hezekiah's reaction when he hears this awful prophecy about the future.
Hmm.
This is maybe the most startling part of the whole chapter.
It is quite something. After hearing about the future destruction and his descendants' fate, his response is recorded as, "The word of the Lord you have spoken is good," Hezekiah replied.
Good. He calls that prophecy good.
Yes, and then the text explains his thinking. For he thought, will there not be peace and security in my lifetime?
Wait, so it's good because the disaster won't happen while he's still around after God just gave him 15 extra years? That seems incredibly self-centered.
It comes across as remarkably short-sighted, doesn't it? There's this stark contrast between his desperate prayer for his own life and his apparent relief that the catastrophe will hit future generations, not him personally. His main concern seems to be his own reign stability.
It's a really complex, maybe even disappointing end to his part in the story after seeing such faith earlier.
It adds a layer of very human complexity, certainly.
The chapter then just briefly wraps up, right?
Hmm.
Mentions his other achievements, like the Siloam Tunnel.
Yes, it mentions the pool and the tunnel he built to bring water into Jerusalem. Famous engineering feats notes, they're recorded elsewhere. And then simply states he died and his son Manasseh took over.
Leaving you with this incredibly compressed narrative arc.
Absolutely. From death's door to extended life and security, a miraculous sign, then a diplomatic visit, a foolish display, and a prophecy of doom triggered by that display, which the king accepts because it's not on his watch. It's quite a journey in just a few verses.
So we've walked through Hezekiah's brush with death, his powerful prayer, the amazing turnaround with extended life and deliverance, that extraordinary sign with the shadow.
Then the visit from Babylon, Hezekiah showing off everything, and the immediate prophecy of future exile and loss, stemming directly from that choice he made during his extended life.
It really highlights how, in this account, divine intervention and human action are constantly intertwined. Prayer seems to matter, practical action like the fig poultice is still used, but then human choices, maybe driven by pride or poor judgment, have these huge, long-range consequences.
From near death to extended life, and then an action within that extended life setting up future disaster. It's a potent sequence.
Which brings us to that final thought for you, the listener, to mull over, drawing just from this chapter we've looked at.
Yeah, think about Hezekiah's specific reaction to that devastating prophecy, calling it good, because in his words, will there not be peace and security in my lifetime?
What does that response tell you about his priorities, right after experiencing such personal deliverance? And more broadly, what might this story suggest about how our actions, even things that seem relatively small at the time, like, say, showing guests your valuables, could potentially ripple outwards with consequences far beyond what we might imagine or even live to see?
It definitely gives you pause, thinking about personal comfort versus legacy and long-term impact. A lot to chew on there.